A farm deer in generally is probably slightly better finished as far as a carcass is concerned. But English fallow deer, particularly when they're grazing on set-aside land and woodland margins, can get as fat as pancakes, so there's no detriment to the finish of those deer. That is the fundamental difference. It means that you have the meat at its best quality. They have a higher fat content, yes, but because the fat is laid externally to the muscle, we're able to remove it from the steaks and the various cuts. So our average haunch steak, for example, is probably about 1.6% fat, about 0.6% saturated fat. The difference between wild and farmed is minimal if the animals can be gathered in the right condition and selected accordingly, and there might be a little bit more flavour to the wild venison, but in general the quality will be good from both. You know, they're eating the hedgerows, the berries. You know, deer are great browsers. On our farm, for example, where they have access to the hedgerows, we never need to see a hedge cutter. They eat all that sort of browsing. So in the same way that our Herdwick sheep enjoy the hedges, you know, it's just a natural grazing for them, and how great that they can have that sort of as part of their diet. Harwood is a good example of a local park, set up a good number of years ago with red and fallow, and originally with fallow, then they introduced red into it. And so in a park like that, they'll have the stags and hinds and bucks and does running over probably 1,000 acres or so, including some woodland that they've opened up to the deer in the park there. And those deer are managed by a deer manager who will inspect them once a day just to make sure everything was all right, because there's a lot of public access in the park, so it's important to look after the animals. But the deer have complete free roam of the whole area. So they are managed as a wild herd, in that every year are selected out young stags for meat and young hinds for meat at their appropriate times, and they're governed by the seasons of the wild. There were 3,000 deer parks in the UK originally. There are now about 160, 170 actually with deer in them, where effectively there's a bit of a marginal difference between wild and farmed, in that in a park they're within a controlled area, but they're wild within that park. The park scenario allows us to get an animal quickly into the process. There's 10 species of deer, but not all deer species that you can farm or herd together in or live in a group. So red and fallow are the two principal species that we're working with. Fallow are our favourite because the meat's just so tender.